So quite a few State of the City addresses going on. The most recent of them today in the city of Johannesburg, where Executive Mayor Kabelo Gwamanda was delivering both his assessment of how the city is going and what it's been doing up to now, and also outlining some of the things that they plan to do in the future. We won't be able to cover all of it, but let's go through some of the things that seem to be of particular importance. And welcome to 702 Drive, Miyelani Holeni. He's the Group Chief Advisor with Ntiyiso Consulting, and he is an expert on local governance. Mr. Holeni, welcome. It's good to have you with us on the show.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon to the listeners as well.
So I want to read this sentence and then ask you a question off the back of it. It's taken out of the speech as shared with us. Water is accessible to 98.3% of households, referring obviously to Joburg. Electricity is available to 94.1%. Sanitation is provided to 93%, and refuse removal is extended to 90.5%, ensuring that every part of the city has the basic amenities required for a dignified existence. Surely if those things are not provided on a sustainable way, at an effective level of service, those numbers are absolutely meaningless. I mean, I can only conclude that if you take the water, for example, those pipes and taps may have been provided at some point, but is the mayor really suggesting water is regularly available to 98.3% of Johannesburg households? I would expect our listeners would beg to differ.
So, John, I think the issue of the city of Johannesburg, I mean, we must first acknowledge that city of Johannesburg is a very complex melting pot,
yes,
cosmopolitan, as well as, having as well the other side, which is, exhibiting rural aspects to it within the entire or in the peripheries. So the issue of supplying of services, especially basic services, has a higher penetration as we see it. But we also see that, the penetration in terms of the services, there's quality issues that are bedeviling the city of Johannesburg, especially around, the frequent provision of such services.
Right.
Let me also mention that if it's not only water, it's also electricity, not only because of the load shedding aspects, but because of the downtime, because of the infrastructure backlogs or the maintenance of infrastructure that needs to be undertaken. If you come back to the water side, if you have a penetration as high as the mayor has put forward, it's well and great. But it still highlights a backlog of about 27 billion rands in terms of water provision,
yes,
infrastructure, and so on. So there's almost a point where perhaps the penetration may be high, but we also need to look at the resilience and the strength of that network to be able to consistently supply water and to supply electricity to the greater population of the city of Johannesburg. So there's a lot of work around the quality of supply,
right,
the efficiencies, as well as making sure that those that receive the water receive it, as frequently and as they should.
So, I mean, here's another thing that, speaking of electricity, in the speech, the mayor says, we have also planned for an additional 100 megawatts by the financial year's end. Now, that's pretty soon in the scale of local government provision around infrastructure, and yet there's no explanation as to where or how that's going to be done. I mean, do you have any insight as to where those 100 megawatts are going to come from?
Well, we would certainly hope that the city is taking advantage of the 100 megawatts of renewable energy allocation that is available to cities. And not only that, because they can get into different partnerships with providers or generators of electricity. So that we hope that the partnership aspect, which the mayor also alluded to, they are taking advantage of as many private sector or at least, people who have services or technology that they can provide to the
right,
city. So we don't see the city being able to do all of this all on its own. They need to look at how they partner with the various people who have the proprietary technology or their original equipment manufacturers, as well as the smaller entrepreneurs that are coming up with different technologies to help the city. So renewable energy is a possible option. But the other aspect is we hope that, they are looking at waste to energy, because the city collecting such a huge amount of waste annually and sitting with landfill sites, those landfill sites ought to be productive from producing electricity or producing methane gases and so on. So it would be great to see the innovation if it's perhaps coming from a waste to energy type exercise. But renewable energy is one that the city has to put its foot forward and drive the generation of electricity after the difficulties of the likes of Kelvin, which are not coming at least to the fore as much as they should.
So finally, Mr. Holeni, I mean, one of the things highlighted by the mayor that I think no pun intended, is an unqualified achievement, but I'll read it and then get your view. He says, above all, I take great pride in revealing that our city and all its entities have achieved an unqualified audit opinion. Given the fact that well-managed finances is absolutely at the heart of being able to do all the things you're promising to do, that I would recommend represents a substantial achievement for the city.
I think the achievement, and this is what the sentiment in the industry goes like. An unqualified audit must be accompanied by a very strong delivery of services. But on the other side, it must also be accompanied by a strong generation of revenue. So looking at the completeness, eliminating the leakages in the revenue value chain, as well as continuously exploring new sources of revenue. So service delivery is based on generating revenue. So we want to believe that the service delivery aspect is as high as it should, or must be as high as should be, because you can have a clean audit, and it's clean audits start with the practices and the governance and the controls that you put in place, but may and must always translate into the technical aspects of running a municipality. So whilst we commend the city, which is excellent in terms of governance, because it points to the strong governance ethos of the managers within the city, but it must always translate into very strong service delivery, as well as the ability to generate revenue and not leave any money on the table, but also to be innovative in the way that all of this is done, such as for the asphalt issue that they mentioned, that they can now produce 1,520 asphalt tons per day. That helps a lot, because it means they are producing their own raw materials and reducing their costs, and therefore can then build roads much more than, or tar the roads much more than the 58 kilometers that they have mentioned, and patch more than the 477,000 potholes that are there, as well as get into the preventative maintenance of infrastructure. So that is what an unqualified audit hopefully must translate into, the proactiveness of the city, as opposed to looking at the paper achievement and not translating it into the technical capability.
Very good note on which to end, and an important thing for us to follow and monitor. Miyelani Holeni, we thank him. He is Group Chief Advisor with Ntiyiso Consulting and an expert in local governance. 702 Drive.